Welcome back to Transitions to Greatness. I am your host, Dr. Kelly. We are here today with Shari DeCarlo. For those of you who are joining, this is just a reminder that this webcast was created to provide open, honest, and transparent conversation in and around education. We know that there are so many factors that contribute to education, whether directly or indirectly. And our purpose is to have featured guests that provide information for all of us to become better at what we do, because when we know better, we do better, and to really just increase our knowledge and the things that impact education. So I want to welcome Shari DeCarlo. We actually met through a mutual friend and didn't even realize it. So we met on a social networking site and found that we had a mutual friend, and I said, oh, I have to have her on the show. So I'm so happy to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So Shari, I'm gonna turn it right over to you. I know that you have a powerful story to share. Tell us about yourself and your business and what you do.
Okay. My name is Shari DeCarlo. I'm a special education advocate. I'm the owner of Northeast Ohio Advocates. And I was asked why I started doing this, how I became a special ed advocate. Prior to my youngest daughter being born, I worked in materials management. This is not the career I had intended. But when my youngest daughter was born, she was full term. We had excellent health care. We did everything you're supposed to do. I, didn't drink wine. I did yoga. I ate a lot of carrots. And a couple hours into labor, there was a problem. And she had an event called persistent pulmonary hypertension newborn. Mm-hmm. And what that is that her lungs couldn't expand. She had a heart attack, a stroke, liver damage, brain damage, and the hospital we were in did not have a level 3 NICU. So Rainbow Babies and Children's was life-flighting to us. It was a couple hours before they got there with this experimental drug, which fortunately worked. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, she had been a substantial period of time without oxygen. There's this wonderful doctor who was literally standing on a table, pumping oxygen into her for hours, wow, waiting for Rainbow to get there. So she was bright blue. They told us she wasn't going to live. When they put her in the ambulance to take her to Rainbow, they asked us if she stops breathing again, she'll be dead. Do you want us to resuscitate her? Which is not something you ever want anyone to ask you about your newborn baby or about your children in general. Yeah. So we were at Rainbow for 3 months and got incredible medical care. My little girl was in a box with so many IVs that they had to shave her scalp to use the veins in her scalp. And of course, it changed my world. This was not what we expected. This wasn't the Hallmark card we thought we were going to have. I stayed home with my very, very sick daughter for the next several years and educated myself. Mm-hmm. I started becoming the mom that the other moms call when their child is diagnosed with something. Eventually, I started working for a public school district as what's called their parent mentor, which is a program that is a grant program paid for by the ODE. It's someone who is sort of a liaison between the district and the parents of the special ed kids. Eventually, I moved on from that because I wanted to be able to do more. I wanted to be able to speak truth to power. And more importantly, I had a different kind of advocacy in mind. To me, a parent is the best advocate for their child. And the way I can help the most, I can come to a meeting, I can talk to the district for you, but what I can really do that helps is to educate you in how to do those things. Because special ed is complicated and the law is detailed, but it's not something that most parents can't learn. I believe that parents can be educated to understand what least restrictive environment is, what FAPE is, when those things are being denied. So that's why I started the process.
Wow, that is a powerful story, but absolutely understood how that would motivate you to get into advocacy, because not only the challenge of raising a special needs child, but then having to learn about all the laws and, you know, all this lingo that goes behind servicing a child. That is very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. I know there will be somebody that touches and that can help. So thank you for sharing that.
I really hope it does, because I don't want anyone to feel the way I felt for the first several years of my daughter's life. I was completely alone. There's no one else going through this. You're not alone. There are lots of people going through this, and you just need to find those people.
Yeah, absolutely. You may have said that my Wi-Fi is acting wacky right now, but so how did you educate yourself? What are some things that you did to educate yourself? Because I know there's so much out there, but sometimes parents don't even know where to start.
Parents really don't know where to start. For me, PESI, it's PESI, has just classes, all kinds of classes for everything you could ever want to know. There are all kinds of online free things that the Upside of Downs is doing. There are all kinds of classes that, like, people like me, I do free sessions. I'm doing a free session tomorrow night. There are groups on social media that are just parents who are going through what you're going through. And it's so beneficial to talk to other people, because they will then guide you. Hey, did you know you can learn through Ohio Family to Family? All kinds of different support groups, and almost all of it's free.
Yeah, I noticed that you offer a lot of free webinars, and I do my best to share those with colleagues and parents so that they can be informed. So in your experience, what's the biggest challenge that parents face in the educational process? What is it that you find?
It's the lack of knowledge. It's when your child is first diagnosed, or you first think that there's something wrong, you're terrified, you're scared, you're worried, maybe you're a little bit angry because this wasn't what you expected. And you don't know. You don't even know what questions you should be asking. Like I always say, you don't know what you don't know. And you can be an expert in anything else. I have clients who are lawyers. I have clients who are doctors. I was a materials management expert. I didn't know anything about what my daughter's rights were in special education. And the very, very helpful people at her schools would say, well, what do you want us to do? I didn't even know what was available. I think when parents don't know, they just kind of sit there and agree and nod their heads, because you're trusting those great people, those great educators. The problem is that they're not an expert in your child.
Yes.
I believe they are the best intentioned people. People don't go into special education because they're jerks.
Right.
They're good people, they have good intent, but they're not an expert in your kid. They don't know what's going to work for your kid. You have that, and you just need to know what you can and should be asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important for educators to respect that parents know their children as well.
Yes, yes.
We go through all these professional developments and we learn about special needs, but you know, and I believe that after having my own children, I understood that better. I understood that, you know, I know that my kids aren't perfect. I know that, you know, they make poor choices, and educators need to trust that the parents do know, and we have to work together to provide the best services possible.
Yeah.
So then that takes me to this question. So do you find that educators are equally knowledgeable about the process? I've sat in many meetings where, you know, you go through the IEP, and like you said, the parents just smile and wave, you know.
Yeah. Head nodders.
Yeah, and then we're released to implement this IEP. But do you think that educators they really understand what they're supposed to do with those IEPs? Do you think they really follow through? And where do you think that educators could use more professional development?
So I think it's a mixed bag with educators. Like I said before, I think everyone wants to do well, but some educators have been trained, some haven't. If you're a gen ed teacher and you've got 30 kids in your classroom, just statistically speaking, 3 of those kids are going to be on IEPs, 2 more are going to be on 504s, a couple more should be on an IEP or a 504, but they're not diagnosed. They're overwhelmed trying to teach the gen ed kids, and then they've got, you know, 1 or 2 gifted kids. Even if they understand what's in the IEP, asking them to implement it is overwhelming. And most of the times they don't understand what's in the IEP. I'll give you my daughter's example. Her diagnosis is autism, but her bigger challenge is her brain damage. She has short-term memory loss. So you have a student who, you see her IEP, you see the front page, and oh, okay, she's autistic. I know what that looks like.
Right.
There's so much more to that. And if the only thing the gen ed teacher is ever seeing is IEP at a glance, or a really short synopsis of, oh, I understand autism, that's not my kid. My kid's my kid. So it's a mixed bag. I think some gen ed teachers start with, oh, those kids belong to the intervention specialist. They are the intervention specialist students. And that's a problem because that's not accurate. Or they try and have a paraprofessional do the teaching. Also, that's not appropriate. We need to do a better job of giving gen ed teachers time and resources to understand the kids that are in their room. In terms of, you asked what they could have in professional development that would be the most helpful. The easiest answer that would affect the most children immediately is we need to teach teachers to teach kids with specific learning disabilities, specifically dyslexia. There are 1 in 5 kids have some kind of reading challenge. They don't read in the typical way that other students learn to read. And we know statistically that dyslexic kids are extremely bright. What they are doing in class, they are doing from memorization and rote. And they're not doing it because they are able to decode what they're seeing. So they are incredibly bright. Kids that are given the proper method of learning to read, something like Orton Gillingham, doesn't have to be Orton Gillingham, but one of those models. Those kids, when properly trained, do better on SATs. They do better on ACTs. because they were given the tools and they're already bright kids. What we're doing instead at this point is referring them to RTI. We're waiting, then we're referring them to RTI, and that's time that's lost. Yeah. Plus, we know RTI doesn't work for kids with specific learning disabilities in almost all cases. So allowing our teachers to teach reading that works for everyone is the immediate improvement we could do right now to fix our public school system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because more than likely, all the students will benefit, not just, students with.
Yes. Yeah. All kids can benefit from the style of teaching that Orton Gillingham teaches.
Yes, absolutely. I had a question and it just flew right on out of my head. So, don't you hate when you just try to figure out what it was you just lost? But I'll just keep going. How do educators support and meet the needs of special needs students in the middle of a pandemic? So here we are, COVID. I have one student at home doing remote learning because the school was shut down because of COVID. Another one is still doing face-to-face. So how do teachers implement or provide specific support remotely?
It's so hard. 2 nights ago, I actually went to a training from Disability Rights Ohio talking about exactly this topic. And even Disability Rights Ohio is saying a lot of this is nebulous. We don't know. What the state of Ohio has said is that the districts have to provide FAPE when they can. They have to make their best effort to provide FAPE. That's hard for a lot of the kids who are the most challenged, kids who need physical therapy, kids who need intensive OT, kids who cannot attend to a screen for 8 hours. Those kids need something else. They need something more. Parents should be asking, and they should be documenting whatever they're not getting, because there are compensatory services. But in the meantime, what can schools do? My daughter's downstairs right now in the middle of geometry class, and her school is really doing it right because it's a school that is online 24/7, no matter what. They have done some things that are really remarkable to me. I get more contact from her interventionist and from her other staff than I ever got when she was in a brick and mortar school. So communication is first. Yeah. Constant communication. I always tell teachers when I'm working with them, special ed parents aren't like typical parents. There's not too much information. There's never going to be too much information. We're never going to say, wait, I don't need to know that. Yeah. No, we want to know. The more you can tell us, the better. Yeah. Finding out what works for that kid. It is an individualized education program because every child is an individual. If kids can't attend to a screen, what can we be doing? If we're shut down, can we pull them in for a one-on-one or a one-on-two? What can we be doing to make sure that kid is getting serviced in a way they can learn? I have another client that we were really successful in this meeting. The student is home. He has specific learning disabilities and some other complications. But reading for him and attending to a screen where there are words on the screen is exhausting and almost impossible. And then being asked to do written homework on top of it was just too much. And he shut down, he wouldn't do the work. So I asked the teacher in a meeting, can we agree that as long as he's demonstrating knowledge, he can do work in an alternate method? He can draw, he can give oral report, he can, do a collage. whatever that is demonstrating his knowledge. And she's like, oh, of course, he always has those options. But mom didn't know that.
Right.
Mom didn't know that. Mom's spending 5 hours a day trying to get her fourth grader to write a book report.
Yeah.
It's never going to happen. But when we opened that door a little bit and said, okay, can we get creative with, he can, you know, draw you a picture of the big scenes in the book, his whole world opened up because he's great at that stuff. And he did, you know, get the book. So teachers need to be incredibly creative. Administrators need to be flexible. Administrators just shutting things down until I have to come back and say, well, their private OT is willing to do these things. We would like to request that you pay the private OT to do the services that are on the IEP, and suddenly they're able to do the services that are on the IEP. We got to get creative and work as teams. I think, once again, the parents have to educate the educators.
Yeah, for sure. You know, one thing you said that is so important, and we should remember about all students are different. All students learn differently, and teachers should be working to differentiate how they are instructing to meet the needs of all students. Once I found that once teachers get into the habit of teaching a certain way, they do that because it's comfortable. And so if you don't ask what other options or what other ways they can demonstrate learning, teachers are going to do what's comfortable. So I think that's so important that you said that all students learn differently and should be allowed to demonstrate their learning in that way. But teachers have to know who their students are in order to teach to them that way.
I agree.
So that's very important. So as we close out, what are some closing remarks you have? What is it that you want to leave viewers with?
It is so important not to give up, and it's so important not to become complacent. Every kid has the ability to learn, to grow, to be whatever their best life can be. Remain optimistic, remain creative, especially remember that you are not alone. There is a world of help out there. I'll give a little plug for the ARC of Greater Cleveland. I give 10 hours a week to the ARC of Greater Cleveland, which is a free service for parents who just need advice or advocacy. You can call the ARC of Greater Cleveland or email and get free help. Find out what's available to you. Awesome. And how can people reach you if they have questions? You can get a hold of me at sdecarlo at neoadvocates.com. NEO Advocates is all one word. And consultation is free. So you can tell me what's going on. I'll spend some time. I'll read your IEP before we even talk about fees. And like I said, if there's, an inability to pay, we just go through ARC. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a wonderful service that you provide. And I think it's so important because, like I said, I've witnessed parents leaving meetings just kind of going with the flow. Another thing something that I think is so important, and I've shared with many of my students and colleagues, is that a disability does not mean inability. That's true. Empower ourselves to understand the rights of parents, the laws for students. In order for them to transition to greatness, we have to, as educators, become educated ourselves. And we have to
be willing and open to support parents and meet them where they are. So
Yeah.
I really want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. I hope that your message really got out. My Wi-Fi was acting really goofy on this side. I don't know if you saw it over there.
No, it looked fine.
But I think it's very important for us to let parents know that there are people out here that want to advocate for them and their children and help them through the process. So thank you so much for what you do, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.